In the I've read the synopsis for your book as well. Obviously, there was one aspect of it that I wanted to sort of just address specifically, and that is that you talk about how corporate incentives and the newsroom
Yeah.
have come together. And I'm fascinated by this because I think a lot of people don't understand how that's happening, and how that's slowly, probably since Reagan, been allowed to creep in. Most news outlets were, they had to be individually profitable without, or sustainable, I should say, rather, without necessarily, they were augmented by other things, and there
Mm-hmm.
was a separation of church and state, let's
Mm-hmm.
say. Now, unfortunately, newspapers have become, billionaire playthings, or, there are literal corporate interests coming in where you'll have a Pfizer executive. This piece brought to you by Pfizer. It's crazy. Like, I look at that and I'm like, this is satire. This is the fucking Babylon Bee or something, right? Isn't it? But no, it isn't. So tell us about that and how that's happened, because again, I think you'll
Sure.
have a really good perspective on it.
So, there was this sort of golden age that we all look back on fondly, this post-war era where really it was an era of mass economic mobility for working class Americans.
Mm.
And there just was not that much that separated the classes from each other. Obviously, we were still struggling with issues of racial equality and so forth, even from a legal point of view. But between the 50s and the late 70s, you really had this period in which the working class, their lives were very similar to the middle class, and their lives were very similar to the upper middle class. And there was just like a lot of media that was geared towards that center. And the reason for that was, like you say, there was like corporate needs. So for example, you would have a lot of towns that were one paper towns, right? So if you have a one paper in this town, you can either get 50% of the people who live in this town, right? Because people were less sorted, right? There would be Republicans and Democrats in every town in America. You either get 50% by being like super opinionated on the side of the Republicans, let's say, or you can get 100% of the town by reporting the news straight. And furthermore, journalists have always been like much more liberal than the average American. They're sort of, and part of my critique is that liberalism has always been more around issues of identity than around economic issues. But okay, let's say, journalists were always sort of liberals, like pulling to the left, but their bosses were often people without a college degree or people from a small town, or, their boss's boss, right? That the person who owned the paper would be either very wealthy or would be the owner of a corporation. And so they would be sort of pulling in this direction, right? And you kind of have this push and pull, like journalists would want to be crusaders. Their bosses would be like, make sure that Republicans could understand this too and could read this too. And they would meet somewhere in the center. Now, what happened over the last, first, in the, around Reaganism, and then sort of with the advent of the internet, was just the collapse of the local newspaper industry, right? You also had a lot of this sorting happen where a lot of liberals moved to the coasts, right? Leaving sort of small town America to Republicans, right? Just this great sorting between rural and urban America. And so you have now most of the news, like the vast majority of the news is made on the coasts, and it's become very nationalized because everybody's going for that online audience, right? And people who are online, you can get them to care about things that are national. It's much harder to get them to care about things that are local, especially if it's not local to them. But the thing that really, really had an impact was the way in which online you can, and this, right, from writing for the internet, exactly who's reading your stuff, where they're getting it, what's making it go viral. We're all using the same tricks of the trade to get our stuff to appear. And so you measure now success in terms of engagement, right? That's how you're succeeding, is you're getting people to read your stuff. And the most engaged readers are always the most extreme readers. Right. So what that means is that even an institution like the New York Times is now measuring its success, not based on some sort of like journalistic value or moral value, but based on how many kooks on the internet got invested enough in this article to share it to all of their kook followers, to share it to all of their kook followers. And moreover, the price you pay for getting on the bad side of those kooks, right, is enormous, right? We see now the New York Times won't even stand up for its own employees when the kooks on the internet come for them, they just throw them to the wolves, right? So basically what happened was you started to be able to measure in a quantitative way how much money your readers make, where they're located, and what they care about, and what's going to make them read an article, like how much engagement it's going to make. And so it's made everything, basically, if the journalists were pulling this way and the corporations were pulling this way, now the corporations are pulling this way too, right? The money is in the crusade, right? And so everything has sort of fallen off the edge, right? But of course, it's still money. So it's not like they're representing working class Americans. That's where wokeness comes in, you know? It's this great distraction, right? Because it generates a lot of engagement, it generates a lot of clicks, and makes white liberals feel really good about themselves without actually demanding anything from them, right?
Yeah, the performative aspect of it is fascinating, isn't it? That we can just all change our profile picture for a day, and that's it. We've solved everything.
Solved it.
Yeah, and then don't worry, there'll be another hashtag tomorrow. So but it's interesting you say that, because again, before I went and wrote for a right-wing website, I was at a very, very left website as well, the Daily Dot. I'm sure you've seen that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And I can say firsthand what you're talking about there is completely accurate, because every day, was it even Slack back then? Maybe, I don't know, whatever. But we would be in our daily little chats, and it was engagement.
Totally.
And then one of the reasons I left is they started editing my copy to put in things that were designed, if you like, to signal a particular political slant. And I said, don't do that.
It's terrible.
I said, don't do that, because that's my name. That's my byline.
Yeah.
And they were going, well, we think it's accurate. And, they would do things like Gamergate, because we had to write about Gamergate and the great fucking cultural wars of 2014, of which I am a veteran and did 3 tours of Gamergate, but they changed it. So it was like I said, during Gamergate, and they were going, during Gamergate, which was a vicious harassment campaign against women and people of color. And I'm like, whoa. But that was predicated on the engagement it would get. It would get more engagement if that qualifier was there, because people might be going, "Ooh, what does he not think Gamergate is a harassment campaign?" So they used to run shit like that all the time. It was one of the reasons I left. But it's a very astute observation that now, to make money, you cater to the lunatic fringe, because the lunatic fringe will read all of your stuff provided you do that.
Yeah, and this was very much an explicit mandate from the New York Times' new publisher in 2014, in this sort of innovation report where they were trying to figure out why they were failing to go, to really make it in digital journalism. And they literally wrote in the report, there were 2 main things that I think have had a huge impact on the New York Times in a terrible way. The first is they said it's time to take down the Chinese wall separating business from journalism. Yeah. It's the role of the newsroom to increase readership, which is essentially breaking down that Chinese wall you talked about that's always been there. Yeah. And the second thing they said was we need our reporters and our editors to be social media stars. They need to be out there promoting their stuff on social media. The report literally was horrified to find out that there was a journalist who didn't tweet one of his stories for 2 whole days, And essentially what they did was they built their own problem, their own demise, because now their reporters and their editors are social media stars, and they come for their own colleagues. They start these like with Barry Weiss, they start these huge campaigns against them. Donald McNeil, over the Tom Kahn on it with James Bennett. They got their own colleagues fired because they did exactly what the innovation report told them to do, which is become social media stars, have big followings that can, help them promote their articles. And so the New York Times really ceded all of that authority to, the worst place on the planet, which is Twitter,
Yes. Yeah. And Twitter it caters to these people as well. I mean, totally. Every feature they seem to roll out is for the benefit of blue check journalists. And,
totally.
Oh God, spare me the world where everyone's Taylor Lorenz. Just don't. Seriously, you've got permission to just pillow over the face me if we ever get there, because she's simply awful. And like I say,
I plead the fifth because I'm too ignorant of the subject
matter. Oh, listen, I don't blame you. I don't. This is just, I'm just throwing chum in the water for my followers. She's going to be subject to her own episode. She's outrageous.